Hello and welcome to chapter number 7, which is basically using light to make food or light to make energy, and we'll talk about this a little bit. Let's kind of go on in here. And so photosynthesis is basically used by some plants, some algae, and some bacteria, and it's really unique in that you are using the energy from the sun to kind of recreate organic molecules that have been broken down during respiration. Again, so what we're talking about is the transformation of light energy into chemical bond energy. It uses carbon dioxide and water as the starting materials. Now, this is very great, but again, it's only 1% efficiency. And so of all the energy that's coming down onto a plant, only 1% of that is being made into basically these food molecules. Again, it can be improved, and we may think about it a little bit as we're kind of going through this process. So, again, organisms that use photosynthesis are what we call autotrophs. They create their own food. They are what we call the producers of most of the ecosystems, the little green stuff for the most part. And they include plants, mainly on land. They include aquatic protists, which include the algae. Here's the great kelp that we see in California. And then it also includes what we call cyanobacteria. These are prokaryotes that do it. And again, it's these little prokaryotes, we think, that may have formed a symbiosis with the plants and with the algae in order to give us this photosynthesis. Now, we got to know a little bit about the structures of this. Chloroplasts are the site of photosynthesis, and they are found mainly in the interior cells of the leaves. The interior of the cells of the leaves, not the leaves themselves. And so within the chloroplasts, we have these structures that are called thylakoids. They are suspended in what we call a stroma. The thylakoids are in stacks that we call grana, and the green color of the chloroplast. And so when you see a green plant, it's mainly due to the chloroplast, and it's mainly due to chlorophyll that's in the chloroplast, which is that light absorbing between us. Stomata are tiny pores in leaves that where carbon dioxide enters and oxygen exits. And so here's a picture of a leaf right here. And if we take a look at a leaf, and usually on the bottom side, we have these stomata here. And these stomata are little holes that will allow carbon dioxide to diffuse into here. And it's the process of diffusion. Because carbon dioxide is being used up in here, there's very little carbon dioxide in here. Because oxygen is being produced here, this oxygen gets overabundance and moves out of the cells. This is looking at one of those individual cells, and these green things inside of here, those are the chloroplast. Within the chloroplast, you have the thylakoids, and in the thylakoid membrane, you have where the chlorophyll pigments are located. And here's an electron micrograph kind of showing you a little bit about what that is. And so it's good to know what those structures are, okay? The overall equation for photosynthesis is basically looking at, so here are our reactants. Here's the photosynthesis, the enzymatic reaction that's occurring on. And then here are the products, okay? And so what's going on is that the raw materials, carbon dioxide and water, which are your substrates, are being converted by light energy into glucose and oxygen gas. And we can do so. It's 6 CO2, 6 waters are being converted into a C6H12O6 molecule and 6 O2. And so essentially what we're doing is we're stripping off the hydrogen from water and we're sticking it on carbon dioxide in order to make this kind of glucose molecule. Again, sunlight provides the energy to do this. And so you're doing work, and you need energy to do work, and sunlight provides that energy. And so what's happening is that sugar is being produced because we are boosting these electrons to be able to bind to it. And so one of the main things that we're doing here is we're splitting hydrogen and oxygen, which releases oxygen. Again, this oxygen escapes into the atmosphere. So all the oxygen that we breathe comes from plants, and it came from water that went into plants. Now, when we look at photosynthesis, we can divide it up into two stages. One we call the light reactions, which are we are converting the solar energy to chemical energy, and then the Kelvin cycle, which is where we're using the energy products of the light reactions to form sugar from carbon dioxide. And so this is showing you here, so the water molecule is split, the hydrogen molecules are then dumped onto NADP to make NADPH, and we produce an ATP molecule. These energy intermediates can then combine with carbon dioxide in the Kelvin cycle to basically give us our sugar molecules. The great thing about this is that these molecules then can act as carriers. And so this NADP is carrying hydrogen, and the ADP carries the inorganic phosphate, which is released as well, and these are redundant. So the NADP is shuttling hydrogens and electrons around. In this class, I don't get into it that much, but at this point, we're using the same things. Now, we need to understand a little bit of the properties of lights. And light, at least the white light that we have, is made up of a rainbow of colors. And you separate out those colors when you see a rainbow. What's happening is that the vast majority of these lights are absorbed. The energy from those lights are absorbed by the thylakoids, and what is transmitted or what is allowed to escape is basically the green light. And that's why we see these things as being green. And so that's why my outfit here, that's blue, you see blue because it absorbs all the other color and it releases the blue color. I'm not going to get into this, but chloroplasts, there's several pigments that occur in chloroplasts: chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and the carotenoids. And the carotenoids, like their name, are basically this kind of orange and yellow. The chlorophyll is basically green. One of the reasons why we see this beautiful fall foliage, which we tend to not see here as much, is that the high value magnesium from the chlorophyll is taken back, and where you're left in the leaves is with those other colors. Now, basically what's going on in our photosystems is we are harvesting photons, and so we need to describe a little bit about what is the energy. And so what's happening in chlorophyll is that this chlorophyll gets excited by the presence of a light, and it excites an electron. And this electron can either be, moved on to something else and give us there, or what it can do is it can go back down to its original energy state. So here's an energy state. Let's say this is an energy state of 10. This is an energy state up here of 100. And what happens, the light can bump it up to that higher energy state. To go back down to the original state, it can release heat and it can release light in what we call fluorescence. And here's fluorescence, where we add energy in a different form and it converts it into a different form. But ideally what's happening is we don't want this light to go back. We want this light to be used to work, to do something else. Okay, and that's the gist, and that's how photosystems work. And so basically in the photosystems you have the chloroplast, which exists. If we look at the chloroplast, we have our pigments, which are in the thylakoid membrane. These pigments get excited by light hitting them, and they transfer that energy to what we call a primary electron acceptor. And this has a reaction center. What's really kind of interesting is that when this molecule gets excited, it can actually strip hydrogen ions from water, which is really unique in the system. Okay, and again, this is the water splitting system and the NADH producing system as well. So what's going on here in this chlorophyll reaction center? We're splitting water. And when we do this, we produce oxygen, and when we do this, we produce electrons and hydrogen ions. And these, we use this to kind of bump up the energy of a primary electron acceptor. Now, these electrons then can move down what we call an electron transport chain. It's called an ETS. And this electron transport chain we use to make ATP. Now, this electron, rather than going all the way back down to its original energy state, we can pop it up a little bit more. So we harvest some ATP from that, we pop it up a little bit more, and now it has enough electricity. It didn't have enough energy here, and it was too high of a goal to reach. From there, we can now reduce NADP to NADPH. this NADPH can be used to do further work in what we call the light reactions. And so what's going on here is that we have two photosystems. In the first photosystem, you're bumping up the energy of light, and then you're bumping up again, and then this material is able to go into the Kelvin cycle. So we have our NADHs, because again, we're taking carbon dioxide, we're adding hydrogen ions. Where do the hydrogen come from? The H in NADPH. Where does that hydrogen come from? That hydrogen comes from water. Now, the second thing that we use hydrogen for is we have the electron transport chain that works what we call, by a process that we call chemiosmosis. We talked a little bit about that during respiration and how the mitochondria work, but we have this enzyme here that's called an ATPase. And what's happening is during this electron flow, we're pumping hydrogen ions into the thylakoid space. That's this little space inside here. And what happens is we get a lot of hydrogen ions on the outside, little hydrogen ions on the outside. And what's going to happen, these ions are going to want to flow. And as they flow through the ATP synthase, we see the production of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. Now, they use what's called the hard hat analogy. I don't know why they do this, just because these guys are working and you like to draw things with guys with hard hats. But what happens in the photon, you increase the energy of something, and then this energy you can do to release to actually make things like ATP. This energy doesn't go all the way down. You use another energy system, and you bump up the energy of that electron, and now it's high enough for you to be able to produce NADPH. So you're putting hydrogen ions on NADP. Hopefully you understand that. The great thing about that is that we're able to take CO2 then in the air within the space, and we're able to use those ATP, we're able to use the NADPHs, and we're able to use this to make a sugar called glucose 3-phosphate, which then could kind of become any other sugar as well. So what we're looking at here is what we saw originally in respiration in chapter 6 is that food consists of polysaccharides, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay, these are all the things that make up life. We can break these things down further, go through the citric acid, citric acid, and basically we see the production of ATP. What I'm saying here is that with the ATP, we can go through and we can go this system backwards, and we can make all these things. We can make fatty acids, we can make glycerol, we can make sugars, we can make amino acids to make proteins, fats, and proteins. And so what's going on in photosynthesis is we are essentially doing the opposite of this, and that's what we call our anabolic pathways. I hope this has been informative to you, and I will talk to you later.